very warm welcome to Political Economy with Shweta Bunj. This week, we are mourning the loss of hundreds of lives that were lost during a tragic Air India plane crash. The flight was going to London and it crashed minutes after takeoff. The incident has raised several questions and urgent questions about aviation safety, operational standards, and the systems in place to protect passengers and crew. In today's episode, we take a closer look at what's happened, what's known so far, and what this tragedy reveals about the broader state of air travel in India, what are its implications for Air India, and overarchingly, the trust of people in the aviation sector. To discuss this in great detail, I have with me Mr. Jayant Sinha, former Minister of State for Civil Aviation. Mr. Sinha has been one of the key architects of growth in the aviation sector. He has been the driving force behind privatization of airports in India and privatization of Air India. Mr. Sinha, thank you so much for joining us. At a time like this, and you've taken up the time. You're in New York, Mr. Sinha. I want to begin by asking you about your first thoughts on this. Because as someone who has been at the helm of growth in the civil aviation sector, we've had so many conversations about the growth of the sector, and the sector has shown immense promise. How do you see this incident impacting trust of Indians in flying? Because I remember us talking, we've opened airports in small towns and cities. Udega har desh ka har nagrik. That was one of the slogans that you often referred to. Do you see that trust, that faith shaken up, Mr. Sinha?
Thank you very much, Shweta, for having me on your show. Let's first acknowledge that this has been a terrible, terrible tragedy, and our deepest condolences and heartfelt prayers for all those that have suffered because of this tragedy. We must also recognize that it is after 40 or 50 years that India has had a situation where so many people have perished because of an aircraft accident. So it's a moment, as you correctly pointed out, of deep mourning, and we all recognize what a terrible human tragedy this is. Now, to directly answer your question, Shweta, no, this should not in any way lead us to believe that our aviation system is not safe. Our aviation system is extremely safe. It's extremely well managed. And the trust that we've had in flying should absolutely continue. And of course, as you correctly said, Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik. We want everyone to fly. We want everyone to get the convenience of air travel. And the Indian system, with all its layers of safety, with regulation, with supervision, is very, very safe and among the safest aviation systems in the world. That being said, it's very important for us to understand why this accident happened. The investigations have begun. There are obviously investigations being conducted by DGCA, by our accident bureau, by the National Transportation Safety Bureau from the US, from Boeing. So everybody that is involved in these kinds of investigations is going to look into this matter, really understand what the issues are and what systemic fixes are required to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But I will once again re-emphasize that our aviation system is among the safest in the world, and in part because of all the different things we have done over the last 10 or 15 years to make it safer every single day.
But is there room, Mr. Sinha, to maybe introduce more checks? Because in the last few years, especially when domestic airlines are concerned, there have been concerns that have been raised on pilot fatigue, and we've had certain incidents with some airlines of where engines have got fired and so on. So, is this a moment of reckoning for us? Is there a need to maybe relook at the standards, relook at our enforcement policies when it comes to aviation safety?
Every aviation system is continuously being checked, whether it is in India, in the United States, or around the world. And it is a process of continuous improvement as well. As you know, the US also had a very terrible accident not so long ago in Washington, D.C., where a helicopter collided with a regional jet and everybody died in that
Yes.
air crash as well. So accidents do happen. Of course, we all know that air travel is by far the safest form of travel, despite these accidents. And everywhere, regulators, safety experts, the aircraft manufacturers, Boeing and Airbus themselves, airlines, pilots individually, everybody is completely committed to safety and is continuously improving safety. As you know, even in this situation, DGCA has asked Air India to actually reinspect all 787 Dreamliners, make sure that everything is checked and rechecked again, just to make sure that every flight, every plane, every pilot, and all of the cabin crew, everybody is absolutely vigilant as far as safety is concerned.
Okay, let's talk about Air India, Mr. Sinha. I remember our conversations during the time when we heard that India was working on privatization of Air India. It was one of the biggest reforms that India had managed to push through, despite a lot of resistance. But since the disinvestment, Mr. Sinha, since the privatization, and since the Tatas have taken over, it almost seems like that the Tatas are having a very challenging time managing Air India. What does this mean for Air India as a brand? This specific crash in 2010, there was a crash of a similar scale. The number of lives that crash had claimed were fewer as compared to this one. But in 2010, and now we are looking at 2025, and it's been described as one of the worst aviation disasters in a decade. So, what's your sense of what does this mean for brand Air India?
Brand Air India will be affected, but let me emphasize that Air India is on a path to terrific and excellent recovery. The Tatas have done a wonderful job in strengthening and improving all aspects of Air India's operations. As you know, they have ordered 570 new planes, demonstrating their confidence in Air India's operations and Air India's safety record. And while Air India has got a lot of criticism for seats, for service, and so on. As far as safety is concerned, Air India's safety record is excellent. Now, I also want to emphasize two additional factors here, Shweta. One, the challenges that Air India has had. You referred to the crash in 2010. There was another crash in 2020 as well. That happened with Air India Express, with obviously the narrow body planes, not the wide body planes. So Air India Express has had a few challenges, but Air India, the international airliner, has had a very, very good safety record, an excellent safety record with its wide body fleet in particular. And in this case, we are talking about the 787 Dreamliner, which in all its many years of service has not had one single fatality. So Air India international operations have been extremely safe, and in particular, the wide body planes that Air India has been flying have also been very, very safe. So that's one aspect to keep in mind. The second aspect to keep in mind in all of this is that in the last few years, since the privatization, the Tatas have invested a tremendous amount in both maintenance, spare parts inventory, as well as in maintenance processes and technical resources to ensure that Air India's safety record, both on the domestic side through Air India Express, as well as on the international side with Air India, have been absolutely world leading. So both because we are looking at international flights on wide bodies and because the Tatas have invested so much in safety, we have to believe that despite this absolutely terrible, terrible accident, that Air India will continue to do much, much, much better than it has when it was government owned, and it will continue to improve. So I have full confidence in Air India and in the Tata stewardship of this very important national airline for us.
But this does shake the consumer confidence, Mr. Sinha. For instance, for me as a passenger, I would think twice now before taking an Air India flight. And I was anyways in a double mind, because of the consumer feedback that one often encounters on social media. This incident is bound to weigh heavy on the minds of consumers who are looking at taking international flights or even domestic flights.
You're absolutely right, Shweta, and we have to acknowledge that reality. Of course, because Air India has been slowly upgrading its fleet, particularly its older aircraft. And of course, we know that the aviation industry is suffering from a lot of supply chain issues because they have been slowly building new planes and refurbishing old planes. That whole process has slowed down considerably, and so there are significant supply chain issues. And so customers have had very legitimate complaints, particularly with the older aircraft, about the condition that these aircraft are in. So that is a very legitimate complaint that our customers have had. And now to that, you add, as you point out, the concerns and worries that you have around safety. So naturally, every passenger is going to pause and think very hard about flying Air India. Again, I go back to what I was saying earlier. I know how committed the Tatas are to build a world-leading airline. They've invested significant amounts of money. They are upgrading the fleet. And so I think passengers should recognize that air travel remains the safest form of transportation. We have to find out what happened with this accident. But by and large, because of everything that is happening, air travel continues to be very, very safe. And Air India is right at the forefront of all of that.
Okay, but let's look at the overall aviation space, Mr. Sinha. If we look at the major airlines that are operating in this sector, we have seen over the years that the competition has actually shrunk instead of expanding, and we've seen a lot of airlines really struggling. So, and that leaves the consumer really, on the back foot, because when it comes to making a choice, you pretty much have most of the international airlines to choose from, and Air India was one of the only ones from India when you're looking at international travel options. And now there is a big cloud over that as well. So how do we see the sector emerge from this? There is a lot of lack of trust, a lot of service issues that have been raised across domestic airlines and international airlines, and now we have this crash. So, what's your outlook on the aviation sector, and how do we see the sector emerging from this when it comes to better service, more choices for consumers? What's your sense of that?
We have to separate the domestic aviation system from international flights. So the domestic aviation system, as you correctly point out, Shweta, has really two main players, which is, of course, Indigo and Air India. Akasa Air is there, SpiceJet is there, and then we have some small regional carriers as well. But it's really the big two, Indigo and Air India, that matter. And here, demand continues to grow. We are adding new airports, we are adding new flights, and hopefully continue to massively strengthen and improve safety record as well. So we will, I think, not see much change because domestically these are the options that consumers have. When it comes to international flights, on the other hand, our passengers have many choices. Instead of flying non-stop on Air India, for example, they can fly one stop through a wide variety of carriers, whether they're the Middle Eastern carriers, the European carriers, or the American carriers. And here, the international flights for Air India were very, very important. The non-stop convenience that they provided of getting straight from Delhi to New York, for example, or Mumbai to New York, meant a lot to Indian passengers. And now, with this question of what happened in passengers' minds, they will look at different alternatives, including non-Indian alternatives. And that, of course, is something that Air India is going to have to deal with and overcome.
So, Mr. Sinha, what does this mean for the aviation sector as a whole? What can the government really do in this? What kind of policies can we work on to nurture more competition, to bring more players into the system? Because at the moment, like we just discussed, that the competition has shrunk. There are barely any big aviation players left, private aviation players left in the system.
Let me make one thing clear, Shweta. Independent of competition, independent of the players, safety is a non-negotiable. And that is true not just in India, but around the world as well. So the regulators, in particular DGCA, as well as the Aircraft Accident Investigation Board, whether it's in India or around the world, the aircraft manufacturers, everybody is going to be absolutely focused on understanding what happened and addressing those gaps, addressing those issues as they emerge from the investigation. So safety is non-negotiable. And as I said earlier, our aviation system, which is the third largest in the world, has a very good safety record. Our inspectors, our supervisors, our regulators are second to none. They're really, really good. We are at the highest level of airworthiness certified by the FAA in the US. So we have maintained and will continue to maintain an excellent safety record. So that is a non-negotiable. Now, let's come to the other issues around competition and choice for consumers. Now, as far as competition is concerned, as I said, domestically, yes, we have less competition than we used to have. Internationally, we still have a lot of competition, lots and lots of carriers that passengers have access to, and that will continue, and that will ensure that all airlines are absolutely on their toes to provide a really good product, a really good experience for passengers. Domestically, we have to understand that in the airline business, the entry barriers are high. They're high because you need significant expertise and skills to start and run an airline. They're high because it requires a fair amount of capital, quite a bit of capital to get going. And they're high because you have to make sure that you meet all of the regulatory requirements, which means that you have to uphold all of the safety and all of the passenger conveniences that you have to provide. So when you add all that up, it's not easy for new entrants. It is difficult, and this is again true everywhere in the world. So we must hope that the existing players, get competition from people like Akasa and others who can grow and who can provide good competition. Around the world, you'll find, Shweta, it's usually 3, maybe 4 carriers that tend to operate in any large market. We already have 2 significant carriers in India. Hopefully, between SpiceJet, Akasa Air, and some others, they will be successful. They will grow. There's a lot of planes on order with these players, and Akasa in particular has got new investors as well. And so hopefully they will grow and provide excellent competition. And so domestically, we have to keep doing whatever we can from a policy and a regulation point of view to foster competition and to foster supply for our passengers. But once again, let me conclude by stating that as far as safety is concerned, that is a non-negotiable for everybody, domestically or internationally.
What does this imply for Boeing, Mr. Sinha? We saw share prices of Boeing tank post the crash, and a lot of reviews have come out. A lot of we're reading articles on a bunch of whistleblowers from Boeing raising concerns about specifically Boeing 787. So do we see that there's a possibility that India could actually ground all the Boeing 787s that we've bought, and what does this imply for Boeing as a supplier of aircrafts?
So, Shweta, I was involved in the grounding of the 737 MAX, the Boeing 737 MAX, which then resulted in a very significant impact on Boeing. And Boeing has been struggling since then to actually get its operations in order and to reinvigorate its supply chain ever since then. But because I was involved in the 737 MAX situation, and I'm looking at what has happened in Ahmedabad right now, I must tell you that they're very, very different. In the 737 MAX, there were 2 fatal crashes that happened, one in Africa and one in Indonesia. So we knew that there was something systemic that was going on. We also knew that there were problems with the safety of the aircraft and the way the rudder was being utilized, and that there was a software defect that was systemic. And therefore, the entire 737 MAX fleet needed to be grounded, needed to be checked, needed to be upgraded so that this problem could be fixed. So it was clear that that was the right action to take. And we ordered all the 737 MAXs to get grounded. And this was then followed by many other jurisdictions around the world as well. So that was the situation with the 737 MAX. In this particular case, we have the 787 Dreamliner that has never had any fatality before in its many years of history. There are 1,200 such 787s around the world, and we do not see anywhere else a crash of this type. Now, if such crashes happen in the future, and if the investigation tells us that there's a systemic problem, then that whole fleet of 787 Dreamliners, which is 1,200 Dreamliners, will have to be grounded. But there is nothing at all to indicate that there is a systemic issue here for the Dreamliner. But again, as I said, the investigation is crucial here. It takes time to determine what the issues are. Thankfully, we found the black boxes. They will be studied very, very closely. The data that we get from the black boxes will tell us a lot, and we will find out more about it. But we are not yet at the situation where the fleet has to be grounded. We need to understand the situation a lot better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Sinha, for that very nuanced perspective. Like you said, that the investigation is still on. We still don't know what caused this deadly fatal crash. And also comforting to hear from someone who has been at the helm of civil aviation that aviation regulations in the country are at par, and citizens do not need to worry about air safety in India. I think that's very, very comforting coming from you. Thank you so much for joining us on this broadcast. Of course, we will be following up on this story regularly, and as we know more, we will come back to our viewers with more details and more analysis. Thanks so much for watching, and do send us your thoughts and feedback on the comment section below. And a big thank you to you, Mr. Sinha, for joining us.